Hello, I am your everyday average Jonathan. Join me this week as I turn this into this, what I'm calling a quillian throwing dagger for a mother's daughter.
Son of a freaking dragon!
Hello, I am your everyday average Jonathan. I'm an ordinary guy with ordinary tools making extraordinary items. And in all of the videos that I've made, I have yet to show what I call my mountaintop, the tallest point on my property, which is probably right around 8,500 feet in elevation. And this is it. And the reason I'm showing this is I'm actually up here collecting rocks for the rock fort that I'm building for my daughters, which is going to take a very, very long time. So in the meantime, I am taking on other projects and other builds. But real quickly, this is pretty cool. Over here, you have Wyoming. I can see the lights of Cheyenne at night. I can see the glow of the lights of Cheyenne at night. And across these hills, I can see the glow of the lights of Laramie at night. Over my shoulder a little bit farther, in the farthest distance is Nebraska. You can see Nebraska. And then basically straight across the Great Plains to the east here is Kansas. If I turn this way, it's gonna be really hard to see on the camera, I think, but those mountains up there, those are what's called the Mummy Range. They're all 13,000 foot peaks: Hagues Peak, Mummy Peak, Absalon Peak. And then sometimes the lights of Estes Park are shining over. Little bunny just ran off in the distance. So a very idyllic setting in the mountains. But at this mountaintop, there just happens to be, and I'll show you, really, really nice rocks, flat rocks all over the place for me to choose to take down and start building my rock fort with. That is to come. It's going to take me a lot longer than I initially had thought. But to this week's build, I was commissioned by a friend of mine who asked me to build her daughter, her 22-year-old daughter. She said that her daughter is really into these sorts of things. She's really into anime. And I asked her what type of knife that she would like, and her daughter came back with a suggestion that is called a karambit, which anybody who knows knives knows that a karambit is a really interesting, wicked cool knife. But I rebutted her and I said, well, I have this knife that's been sort of rolling around in my imagination. It's a cross between what's called a quillian dagger and maybe a throwing knife. I've made throwing knives, but I've never made a quillian dagger before. So I drew a really, really rough outline. I sent it to her and she said, and her daughter's response was just a picture of, I think it's Mr. Smithers from The Simpsons going, excellent. So that's what we'll be making this week. I'm gonna collect a few more large rocks up in here on the mountainside, but after that, we're gonna get down to the shop and get started. Come with me for this build. So I said the word quillian dagger, and a quillian dagger is essentially just a dagger that serves a lot of purposes. It's usually something with a strong defined pommel and something with a very strong defined guard. So in keeping with that, I was going to make something that had a defined pommel of sorts, no guard, and more of a throwing dagger, a throwing knife, or even something called a dirk for the blade. Since this dagger is going to someone's daughter, I am figuring that this is going to be more ornate and more for visual appeal than for use. At least I hope it is. So I'm cutting this out of 1/4 inch thick mild steel, and then the handle is just going to be a 1/2 inch thick steel square rod. I am going to end up making what's called a pineapple twist in this, and a pineapple twist is really pretty interesting, and I really like it more than most twists. You cut 4 grooves into each side. As you can see here, you'll look up at the top and you see those 4 longitudinal grooves, and then you heat it up. Use this twister that I've made myself. I'm very proud of that. You twist it a certain amount of times. In this case, I twisted it 6 full rotations. Then, after you're done with that, you're going to come back. You are going to cut more grooves into it while it's twisted. Then you're going to go heat this thing back up and untwist it half the amount of times that you originally twisted it. If that makes no sense, that probably is because I didn't say it very well. Here I'm making the pommel. I actually did twist this a little bit thinner metal than the actual handle is, but I'm just going to make a ring, a loop out of twisted metal, and then just weld it together and attach it to the handle. Now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna pick that back up. We did not see that. We'll just pretend that never happened. I decided to really give the blade a very hammered look. So I'm using 2 different types of hammers just to put as many dents and many blows into that blade, because when I sand the edge, it's gonna leave that sort of hammered look there. And here I'm spray painting the outline back onto this metal so that I can go ahead and sand off and grind off the parts that don't match the outline. I decided that I didn't want to just straight weld this piece on there, the handle on there. I wanted to give it a little bit of personality where the attachment is. So what I'm doing is I am going to grind in, cut in, and then open up this handle so that it fits over the blade. I will weld it from the bottom side so that you don't actually see the weld. Now ensues something that I really dislike. The amount of grinding that goes into these sometimes really just, it perturbs me. It just takes me forever. I probably spent about an hour grinding this edge in. And getting ready to apply the artist touch mark, get the metal red hot, orange hot, and then go ahead and a couple hammer blows, and hopefully someone can tell that I actually did that. This is mild steel, so I decided to quench this in water, and something very interesting happened, and it's a first for me. I know quenching in water comes with its set of risks, but because it's mild steel and it doesn't have that much carbon, I was surprised that it bent, it deformed. Now I have seen that done before, but not with mild steel for me. So I went back over, hammered it back flat, put it back in the oil over here, and it turned out great. Now fitting the handle on and getting ready to weld them back up. Just a matter of a few tack welds, and then behind the scenes, off camera, I put in quite a bit of other welds below it. Grounded it out, and then hammered these little, I'll call them alligator jaws, closed onto the handle. It wasn't quite perfect. I needed to sort of give it another twist, so I had to set this back up and go ahead and untwist it a little bit. This is my sharpening file. It's electric file. It's made for sharpening knives. I really like it. It does a very good job, and you can kind of eyeball it while you're sharpening it. I would like to say this was sharp enough to cut paper, but I think it's actually just tearing the paper there, but we'll call it sharp enough. And here it is. I am really happy with how it turned out. I think it looks really cool. It feels great in the hand. It's got a lot of heft. It's got a lot of bearing and weight to it. I hope that the young girl is going to like it. I think that she will. Thank you for joining me for this build. This build was a lot of fun. It was very straightforward. I like things, of course, that come together quickly and that meet my expectation, and the design, I think, came out great. It is a little bit longer than I intended it to be, but I really like the way it looks. It's the cross between a throwing knife and what might be called a dirk or a quillian dagger. So here's the cool thing. In the last year, I have received 5 commissions to build a weapon, a replica, a fantastical implement for someone's family member. 4 of those 5 commissions were for someone's daughter, and the 5th was for someone's son. I love the fact that people are getting these for their daughters. People are thinking of warrior maidens, Valkyries, and capturing or helping capture their daughters' imaginations with these things. I think that's the coolest thing in the world. As a father of 2 daughters, I couldn't be happier to make recreations and implements like this for someone's daughter. The only learning that I have from this is one that I kind of saw coming, and it's actually probably the first time I've experienced that, and that's when I quenched this. This is mild steel, but when I quenched it, it bent. Now I've seen that happen. I've seen it on Forged in Fire. A lot of us have, but that's the first time that's happened to me. Normally they just crack and split. Usually mild steel is going to take a quench in water just fine because there's very little carbon in it, if any. So that was pretty fascinating. Other than that, this came together really well. My friend whose daughter I made this for, when she reached out to me, she asked about this just very politely. And in that conversation, she also mentioned that she had recently been laid off. So she doesn't know this, but I'm not gonna charge her for it. I'm gonna mail it to her. She's just gonna get it. She's not gonna know that it shows up. So hopefully a little bit of light, not just for her daughter, but also for her in a surprise for her. I'm happy to do it. Anyhow, thank you for joining me for this build. Next week, I'm going to begin to build something that is actually kind of a large project for me, and it's going to be a Gothic rustic lantern, fire lantern, something I'm probably gonna blow myself up and my shop. But join me for that. I look forward to it. If you like builds like this where you see fantastical, whimsical, eccentric pieces of art or weapons and armor, something of that ilk, check out my channel for other builds where I take on interesting projects like that. Until then, God bless. We'll see you next week.